All
You got your
right.
little intro.
Yeah. Okay. So, Poe the person is a married woman, and she's part of a group server we have. We talk about philosophy and politics, etc. And she had done a video on MGTOW, and I know DDJ, and he's got his own MGTOW channel. So I thought it'd be a great matchup to see them talk about their ideas because they're both articulate and seem to have a good idea of how to really dig into an idea without getting all stupid about it. Um,
Thank
so,
you.
uh, Poe, why don't you? We were talking before the video about a bit about what you guys thought of each other's channels and what kinds of videos you've watched
Yeah,
so
when
far.
you said that I made a video about MGTOW, it just reminded me that I should say right off the bat that the video I made about MGTOW was not intended to be an official critique or a kind of debunking video at all. I just my channel is just a vlog essentially where I talk about ideas that I've been exposed to recently and just sort of things that have been going through my mind. Don't ask me while people watch it. I've got no idea, but it it was never supposed to be an attack or a me trying to start a fight or aligning myself against MGTOW or anything of that sort. Um, after Concept Hut set up this discussion, I started watching DDJ's videos. Of course, before making my own MGTOW video, I saw a few other MGTOW YouTubers, but not DDJ specifically. But um, yeah, I quite like DDJ's videos. As I was saying before we started the stream, I think DDJ is probably one of my favorite MGTOW YouTubers that I've come across. Him being quite articulate and I'd say realistic, not speaking beyond his areas of expertise and just being down to earth and I consider in touch with reality. Let's just say. Maybe that's me stepping beyond. Well, whatever. What about you, DDJ?
I liked your videos, and I actually took your video, your channel as more of a vlog, so I didn't give you the same kind of scrutiny I would get with somebody who had a channel that was more of a theme channel. And it was very clear that a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, it seemed like you, even though you're articulate, you're like exploring some ideas in the middle of your videos. So I thought that was kind of nice as well, because it was sort of like a stream of consciousness, but not quite as not so much as an internal monologue. So yeah, your videos aren't bad at all, and I see you've got a fair amount of subscribers, so it's very clear that I'm not the only one that likes your videos.
Yeah, that's the feedback I've got from my subscribers is that they enjoy the fact that I haven't really come to any firm conclusions. That I'm kind of making the videos halfway through thinking something through, so that everyone is exposed to my thought process and everything that goes into what I'm thinking, rather than presenting something as a conclusion or as an article or a proper finished book or essay.
Right, that makes sense.
Okay,
All
so
right.
now that you guys have talked a bit about that, could you, Poe the person, could you summarize what you think MGTOW is, and then um, make some a small bit of commentary about a response to what you think about MGTOW in general, and then DDJ, you can talk about what you think MGTOW is and your responses to like traditionalist uh, views, I guess.
All right. I'm sorry if I make a fool of myself here. I don't usually speak live, but I'll try to articulate my idea of what MGTOW is as clearly as possible. Well, I came across MGTOW, I think, after making my my first very popular video, well, relatively, which is about well, never mind about that, but I started getting comments from people calling themselves MGTOW, so I started looking into it, and it seemed to me at first to be simply men who were dissatisfied with how the courts and the laws in Western countries such as Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and of course USA are dealing with divorces. And since the sort of second wave feminism, divorce law is now biased against men to the point where divorce quite often, or it ruins many men's lives, certainly. And MGTOW seems to include a lot of personal experiences of men who've had their lives ruined by women who they thought they could trust in marriage. And basically, MGTOW, men going their own way, have decided to not get married in order to avoid the disastrous effects of divorce that have come about because of sexist laws and sexist implementation of laws after the feminist revolution of marriage law. How's that?
Yeah, that's
Appreciate it.
fine.
All right, so you ready for my my response and what my thoughts about MGTOW are and that kind of thing?
I'm leaving a lot out, but I wanted to keep it short so that I could get your feedback sort of as soon as possible.
All right.
Rambling on for too long.
No, that's fine. I actually was going to tell everybody, hey, look, if you've come to the channel, smash the like button. Dox yourself. MGTOW is war. We are soldiers. God is great, and everybody else is part of the Jew world order and all that other bullshit. Now we got the retardation out of the way.
Yep.
All right.
Now we have the retardation out of the way, and the TISM world order is now fully in effect. I think you're right. I mean, MGTOW is a response to feminism. But it's more of a response to gynocentrism, because on the left side of politics, you have feminism as far as the gynocentric curve, so to speak. On the left side is feminism. On the right side are the traditionalists. Both are very gynocentric in nature. They're just a little bit different in how they execute and what some of their value systems are, but they're very, very similar in concept. And so you're right. I mean, there used to be a balance before second wave feminism. There used to be a balance in relationships between men and women, and that balance with marriage was important because a man and a woman could bring accountability within the marriage, and they could bring accountability in that relationship. Since second wave feminism, men can no longer bring accountability to their marriage, and so what ends up happening is that when a woman violates the bonds of marriage or violates her vows, there's no accountability for it. So her hypergamy is basically, it's unrestrained. So there's no way for a man to have that. And frankly, in this day and age, I would argue that there is no benefit for a man to be married in this day and age, in anywhere, in any country that has adopted feminism or any country that is in the process of adopting feminism.
I think that's where we disagree, but we'll get onto that later. I mean, everything else you said is spot on. I think about laws and about gynocentrism is not a word that I usually use in my vocabulary, but about it being unbalanced and about women not being held accountable anymore. I think you're absolutely right.
Real quick, DDJ, could you please summarize the definitions of hypergamy and gynocentrism?
Yeah, gynocentrism at its most base level is female superiority, or basically putting women before men. And then as far as hypergamy is concerned, it's a biological instinct that a woman has to find the best genetics and the best provision to breed.
Okay, well maybe we could start there just on something on a scientific basis that's not really based on opinion. But in regards to hypergamy, do you think it's a bad thing on its own, or do you think it's a bad thing when gone unchecked?
Oh, it's not a bad thing on its own. I think that, look, if we didn't have hypergamy and people didn't go out and look for the best genetics, we would have a bunch of retard kids running around, and we have kids with like 4 eyes and shit like this, and a hand growing out the center of their back. No, I mean, I think that hypergamy is not a non-issue. It's unrestrained hypergamy or hypergamy unchecked that is the issue.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure that's what I thought you'd say, but I just wanted to make sure that we were square on that.
I think that's an excellent thing that you guys just focused on, because a lot of politics and social conflict, disagreements of how social things should work, is around black and white kind of thinking. It's not a anything with a clarifier. It's everything to its absolute. So it's important to be able to see it like that.
Yeah. Also, just a hashtag shill alert. If you guys have come into the chat, I see there's 119 watching. Please smash the like button. And if you enjoy the Concept Hut's moderation, feel free to subscribe to his channel.
Yeah, definitely.
Concept Hut, do you want to take us to the next piece of this? I think I've answered the question about what, as far as MGTOW is concerned.
Oh, I thought you guys were gonna
Yeah, we can talk about that. That's fine.
talk about the okay, so Poe and DDJ, just what are the disagreements you have with each other's positions? I mean, you sort of touched on that a little bit already, but that's where I would like to see things hashed out a bit in this conversation / debate.
Well,
So why don't you start, Poe, and DDJ,
Yeah.
you can respond, and then when you figure, when you've decided to move to the next thing, fragment from there, I guess.
Okay, well, I'll just reiterate sort of what I said in my video, which was sort of where DDJ and I disagree. Of course, I think marrying is everyone's individual right. I don't pass judgment on any man who chooses not to marry for any reason, really. That's his own personal choice, and same for women who choose not to marry. What I would disagree with is the idea that there's no benefit to marriage at all. I'll concede that it's a kind of it's a weird kind of idea, and I think there's a sort of there's something about traditions that's often hard to translate, or it's hard to express exactly why some traditions come about and what makes them significant, or what makes them still useful, which is sort of every generation's struggle with trying to convince their children to believe what they believe, because some things do just sound like magical thinking. I mean, why is having the law involved in your relationship better than just doing your own thing, being in a relationship or not as you choose fit? So being a bit of a libertarian myself, I'm not particularly happy with how much the law is involved in marriage, and I decided to invite the state into my home and get married legally to my husband. So some of my reasons for doing that might sound a little bit I suppose you might think them to sound a little bit magical, but I'm going to try and present it as rationally as I can. So I think it's important to think back to what marriage kind of used to be before the law was even involved, before there was even a proper court system for anything like that, where two people would just present themselves to the community and say to everyone who they knew, basically, that we're going to be married from now on. This is my wife and this is my husband. This is the definition of our marriage. So we are no longer available. We're going to be starting a family, and we have vowed to treat each other properly according to our culture for the rest of our lives. And the community would kind of enforce that promise to each other, so that if one of them did the other any wrong, then that person would be shunned by the community usually. Although that's not a perfect system, obviously, because anyway, that's why we have laws and not just vigilante rule anymore. But I still think there is a certain logic in that marriage ceremony now, where your names get changed to the same surname in some circumstances. You as a woman, I turned from a Miss to a Mrs. The wearing of rings, or among women, not especially among men, that's a fairly recent phenomenon. And my husband doesn't wear his wedding ring. And I think what I'm trying to say is that when two people in a relationship are committed to each other, and they both make a commitment to be with each other for the rest of their lives, because they do so because they believe that their lives will be better if they are together than if they are not together. And there's a sort of variety of reasons why that might be the case. And it's not just as simple as because they're in love and because they make each other happy. I think being in a relationship is a good, being in a relationship with one person for a very long amount of time is a great way of exploring yourself and being the best person you can be. It's a stable environment for the both of you, for your family, not just your children that you might have together, but also your parents and your extended family. It's a stable situation for everyone really, and that's the kind of value of marriage in society. Is I think it's broadly speaking more stable than either promiscuity or just two people living separately on their own.
Okay.
God, I feel like I really just talked around that point an awful lot.
You did. It was very.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
deflection was impressive. It's fine.
Yeah, as I said, I'm not usually used to sort of just going off on one live. I usually plan out what I'm going to say in videos and then sort of edit it down afterwards. Okay.
Well, you want to do this? Maybe you can kind of collect your thoughts, and I'll go ahead and respond, and that'll give you an option to kind of collect your thoughts and kind of drill down on a couple things, or do you want to continue? It's up to you.
Maybe a sort of a point counterpoint sort of thing would help me more, so that I can understand what you're thinking while I'm talking, rather than just.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Okay, well let me go ahead and address some of the things that you've brought up.
Yeah,
real
please.
quick before you do that, I'd like to interject with a thought on what was said, because I think it might help bridge the gap a bit. It seems like MGTOW generally talk about avoiding relationships and people, and usually because of the problems that can happen when you're trying to have a relationship. Not the actual relationship itself, but the things that surround it, like legal problems, much like how parents talk against sex because of STDs. They're not actually saying sex is bad, okay? They're saying we don't want a baby, out of wedlock, and we don't want STDs. These are the things to be aware of. So I think there is a confusion about each other's opinions, perhaps, because you're coming at it from a slightly different angle.
Yeah, well, I kind of lost track of what I was saying, but I think what I was aiming at is to say that despite the fact that the laws are slightly skewed, and perhaps it's well, it actually definitely is more dangerous for men than it once was. I'd still say that the benefits of marriage are still there. It's just that they are now, the weight of the risks is now heavier than it used to be.
Yeah, okay, so
Yeah,
let me go ahead and
DDJ.
respond. First and foremost, I agree with the idea of community support for marriage. The problem, though, is that second way, and so we're on the same page, and for people who are listening in, when I speak and I say feminism, I'm referring also to gynocentrism. So don't think that I'm letting the traditionalists off at all, because I think that this applies to both. There is no community support for marriage. Feminism has changed society. It has indoctrinated society into something completely different. We don't speak to our neighbors anymore. We don't go out, and I mean, most people who live in rental housing, they don't have this idea of knowing who your neighbors are, or going and having like a housewarming party with the neighbors in the new neighborhood type of thing. There are places that still do it, but most places don't. I mean, I don't practice organized religion. I am spiritual. I'm not. But church has a place in a patriarchal community, and these patriarchal communities, they supported society. The communities were safer, the homelessness was down, the job market was up, families were intact, and children were raised, and there was multi-generational wealth and multi-generational mentorship that happened. However, when second wave feminism came in, second wave feminism waged war on men, it waged war on consensual sex within marriage, and it waged war on family values. And they didn't give a shit who was the victim. And so, children have been victimized, women have been victimized, men have been victimized, and it's been horrible for society, both at the family level, in other words, the husband and wife and the children they're trying to raise, as well as the general society as a whole. So this idea that you know, having community support for marriage, I agree with you, Poe. I think that in a perfect world, or in a patriarchal world, that would be perfect. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world anymore, and we have to deal with the world as it is, not the world that we want, that we have no way to get to. And so people understand too, when I'm discussing patriarchy, I'm using the dictionary definition. I'm not using the feminist redefinition of patriarchy, where people try to use patriarchy as like this buzzword for male oppression. The reality is, and I know because I wrote a best-selling book on it on Amazon called The Feminist Lie, it was never about equality. The reality is that there is no place in history, in Western society, where there has been a patriarchal society that was created for the express purpose of oppressing women. Now, I don't believe in equality. I don't believe in egalitarianism, because everybody is different. Everybody has a different set of skill sets. Everybody is even different from themselves. If you go to the gym and you're lifting weights on Monday, maybe you bench press 250, but that same guy can go to the gym on Wednesday and maybe he can only bench 225. Now, to bring this full circle, I know that kind of seemed like a bit of a tangent, but to bring this full circle, the reality is that in today's society, in first world society, there is no benefit for a man to be married. There just isn't.
What do you, when you say no benefit to being married, are you saying compared to being in a relationship outside of marriage, or compared to being completely single?
I'm saying compared to being single.
Okay.
Obviously, there's artificial things built in, like tax benefits and things like that, to try to lure men into being married.
Yeah,
but the reality is that
that's not really.
Yeah, but I think those are artificial, and I don't think that they're reasonable when you take and like you said, the risk has gone way through the roof, and I would agree with that completely, because almost every man in divorce gets divorce raped. Almost every man gets falsely accused of a crime. And for those people who are dating out there, let me give you the perfect example. Every guy has dated a woman who has said that her ex was abusive, because it's like a fucking dog whistle. Every guy who dates a woman has dated a woman whose ex has said that she's been abused.
You're saying
everyone,
even the ones who are dating girls who've never had an ex-boyfriend?
I'm not talking about first-time relationships. I'm talking about guys, let's say over 30, for example. If you want me to clarify, sure. I'm just saying that this idea of a victim narrative has entered into our society so much that every time a guy breaks up with a woman, every time a woman does something wrong, every time a woman does something unethical, when she's caught, she falsely accuses the person who caught her of abuse, whether it's rape or whether it's verbal abuse or whether it's emotional abuse. So the risks aren't worth the potential breeding access. The only benefit that a man has in marriage traditionally was breeding access. But when feminism created a promiscuity culture, they took that breeding access away, and they said, look, you know, women are available everywhere now. You can just go ahead and bang them. You don't need to get married for that.
Hey, so I want to say something, because I think I've identified a bit of the difference here. I think it's similar to the previous difference, which is Poe is saying that marriage has worth. DDJ is saying it's not worth the cost. It's a slight variance in wording. So DDJ, if the laws were not super skewed and wouldn't unfairly damage one side or the other, would you think that marriage has worth to enter into at that point?
Well, let me start by saying two things. First, I am a reluctant MGTOW. I did not show up and decide to be MGTOW one day. You know, I'm married twice. I was divorced twice. I won custody of both sets of children in both divorces. You know, and I've worked in family law a long time. I have, you know, had women interested in me. I'm not a basement dwelling, neck bearded virgin like the MGTOW stereotype, which is usually not true for most MGTOW. But I've said this many times. I'm a reluctant MGTOW. I'm here because it makes for me, it makes sense. Now, whether somebody else chooses to follow that path or not is irrelevant to me. I mean, nobody's going to judge you if you're not MGTOW. It's a personal philosophy.
I don't think that's true. It seems like a lot of. Well, I don't want to argue against men who aren't in this chat, obviously, but I have seen many MGTOW.
Let me finish my thought if I could.
Yeah, you go ahead.
So with that in mind, the thing that I also want to say is this: families, married couples who raise their biological children together create stronger communities. That is the only benefit on society. Well, I wouldn't say the only benefit, but it's the main benefit of marriage, is that you create stronger communities, you create safer communities, you create multi-generational wealth, you create multi-generational mentorship, and you really create strong communities. So when it comes to marriage, if feminism was repealed tomorrow, if the feminist laws were repealed tomorrow, I would consider marriage.
So are you saying it's purely of utility? It's not because you actually like the person?
Say that again?
Are you saying that marriage is just a thing of utility and it's not about actually liking the person?
I think you have to absolutely like the person. I think that, obviously you have to love the person that you're getting married to, but the point of marriage is that it's a contract. And both parties have to uphold that contract. And the way the laws have been created, anytime I personally, and I say this a lot too, I believe that feminism and gynocentrism has destroyed the social contract between men and women. And so if the laws were repealed where that social contract could be rebuilt, then I think that that's probably the way forward. And a lot of people agree with me on this. So and many people in the MGTOW community. I know I'm streaming with a guy on Sunday who is a reluctant MGTOW. He doesn't want to be MGTOW. None of us do. Most of us don't. We would rather have a relationship with a woman who is loyal to us and be able to start a family and know that we'd be there for our grandkids and that our family wouldn't be destroyed because of feminist indoctrination and the bullshit that goes along with it. But for me, yeah, I totally understand your positions on marriage. I'm just saying that, and I agree with you, Concept Hut. I'm just saying that the juice is not worth the squeeze. When you do a cost-benefit analysis and you put the pros on one side and then you put the cons on another, there are way more negatives than there are positives.
But do you not think that's subject to each person's analysis of the risks and the benefits? You think that's true for every single man?
I think that if a man sat down and looked at the objective cost-benefit analysis and said, okay, here are the benefits of marriage. I've got this relationship. I've got this commitment. I've got this woman I love, and gee, I like to fuck her, and she's great in the bedroom, and she takes care of my laundry, and this and that.
What about if she earns the same amount as him and has a substantial amount of wealth that exceeds his own?
I think that in those types of situations, those relationships typically don't work because the hypergamy kicks in and she'll monkey branch to trade up. In fact, there's been, I don't have the study on the tip of my tongue, but something TNFM and I had talked about in the last couple months. We talked about, there was a news article or a study that came out that talked about it, a news article that talked about a study where one of the key indicators of whether or not a woman will leave a man is whether or not she earns more money than he does. So her hypergamy will kick in, and there will be a time.
It'll kick in after, even if she was earning more before they got married, the hypergamy will kick in after a while, and she'll choose to leave him.
Potentially, I think it's a higher risk. I'm not going to say it's guaranteed, but there's a very sharp increased risk.
Okay, but what's he going to lose when she does?
Hold on. Let me respond to your first statement, because you said asked me if it's per man or if it's every man. Let's go ahead and just do a quick cost benefit analysis. So I talked about the pros. Let's talk about the cons. If you and I were married and we were going to go through a divorce court, the court would automatically assume that you were the better parent than me because you're female. The court would automatically assume that anything I said was suspect because I'm male. And the court would more... I'm sorry?
Is that not subject to the judge being sexist or not?
The judge is sexist because of the Duluth model. And I can go into that in a second if you need me to, but I don't want to dig into that because that's a whole nother subject. But the point is that the system is so biased that, look, you're in the UK. if you and I were married and I'm making substantially more money than you, and you were and you went out and you pissed your money away all the time, if I wouldn't give you any more money, that's considered coercive control, and I can be thrown in jail for it in the UK under current UK law. And that any country that has adopted the coercive control domestic violence laws can do that. The risk is super high, because not only is it the emotional risk of the breakup and the emotional trauma that comes from being rejected by somebody that you love, but it's the financial risk of being divorce raped. It's the legal risk of being jailed. It's the social risk of being branded a rapist or an abuser publicly. And it's the risk, once you start going through those things, a man is more likely to lose his job. So now you've got this huge financial issue. I know many times where a man will start a divorce, all the false accusations will come out. The guy will lose his job because of the false accusations, and then he gets hammered on child support, and then he ends up going to jail as a result, and everybody goes scorched earth on him. There is no objective measure that outweighs that when it comes to marriage. And so one of the reasons, and again, this is just my personal opinion, and I only speak for me, but for myself, when it comes to that, there is no objective measure that can outweigh those risks. The risk of going to jail, the risk of being financially impoverished, the risk of being socially ostracized, and the risk of being blacklisted in your career. That is the potential cost. And so we're on the same page here. The divorce rate in the United States is 46% every year. Most marriages, by the time they hit the 5-year mark, 84% of marriages are separated. And the majority of marriages don't even last beyond the 10-year mark.
I don't see the data on that, because I've actually got data that contradicts that statistic. Although it's not by an order of magnitude, but it's certainly much more optimistic than
I'd be
willing. 5 years.
The first 5 years, it's like 84% are separated, and I can provide that. That actually comes from the census, the U.S. CDC in the census.
What
I
year
can
was
find that. I want to say it was between 2012 and 2014.
So those were people who got married. Well, if that was 5 years before, they'd be married in 2012, no, 2008. Starting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And so, and the thing is that, when it comes to marriage, the community doesn't support marriage anymore. They support infidelity. They support instant gratification. They support breaking the vows of marriage. In fact, every woman thinks that no matter how great the guy she's with is, that once she commits to him, then all of a sudden she's quote unquote settling, and then it's really ridiculous. For most women it is, and that's what society promotes. Maybe the exception to the rule.
It's not really an exception. I mean, it's every person I've met. I haven't seen any evidence for what you're suggesting. Although it could be that I'm biased and I'm not seeing, what I don't believe in. But I think that's well. I could have contradicted a lot of what you said, but I wanted to let you finish. But it does seem like a petty complaint, just because that happened to be the one at sort of at the trail end of what you were saying. But
no, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
I mean, I see this a lot. Is MGTOW saying that the divorce is now being either it's no longer frowned upon, certainly, but it's now sort of encouraged and sort of, you go girl, like, finally get rid of those, throw off those chains of male oppression, feminism now celebrating divorce as a sort of a woman's liberation. I mean, certainly I see radical feminists saying that, but day-to-day life, none of the women I know believe that. They believe in
they don't have to
sticking to it.
But you have to understand that most women want a relationship. Most women want the commitment. They want to have the relationship. But the problem is that when a woman changes her mind, she acts like the new opinion she had was the opinion she's always had. And this, I mean, don't get me wrong. I see where you're going. And I think that maybe with the people that you associate with, maybe the people in your general environment, maybe they embrace family values more. And that's fine. But that's a pocket. And
I don't think it's really a pocket. I mean, it's not like I live in some kind of fairy tale land. I mean, certainly, I was raised in a Christian family, and I went to church every Sunday for 13 years, and certainly within that church environment, family values and marriage values were very strongly sort of upheld. So I don't, considering how widespread Christianity is in most Western countries, I believe if well, regardless on whether you believed in God or not, finding a nice Christian girl and joining a church with a community of people who would support you through that and help you when times get rough and really provide you with the support you need in your marriage would certainly help with that. I mean, removing yourself from feminism and influences you regard as bad. I mean, obviously that's just one thing you can do to mitigate it. I'm not saying that's a cure-all for MGTOW and for marriage and for divorce, but there's certainly, it's not like there's only a few people. I mean, Christianity and just traditionalism in general it's rather large.
Well, let's talk about married women for a minute, and let's talk about married Christian women for a minute. I say something on my stream a lot, and I stand by it here as well, and I'm about to give you an example. Every woman is a slut if you catch her on the right day. I say this a lot. And I say this because it means that if you catch a woman on the right day, if she's ovulating, if she's out on ladies' night or whatever, she's a slut.
Well, not all women go out on ladies' night.
Most again, women who honor their commitments don't do that. But again, women who don't honor their commitments do. So let's talk about Christian women for a second. I knew a woman who was married to a man for 20 years. They had 5 children. He was an assistant fire chief. She was a homemaker. They went to church together every Sunday in the morning. They taught Sunday school together in the afternoon. On Wednesday evenings, they taught church school, like a church class for their religion. She was highly involved. She worked at the local food bank, and they were very involved in their community. And by all outward appearances, they were a completely perfect, happy couple in a very committed long-term relationship. She had a burner phone. She had a parallel set of social media contacts, and I know this because she pursued me, and we started seeing each other, and we started having sex, and I only found out she was married afterward. And when I talked with her about it, it turned out that she had never been loyal to a man, and this chick was more freaky than many women that I have seen doing porn. So
you're saying you can never be sure.
And nobody, the thing is, she was above suspicion. Like, I didn't suspect anything until I started seeing the signs. And then when we sat down and we had some conversations about it, and I was like, what the fuck? And she's like, yeah, I love him, I care about him, but I like to fuck you. And I've talked with other guys, and I'm not a PUA. Like, I'm not a Chad. I'm not Chad Thundercock. I'm not Tyrone. I'm a guy. I'm just a guy. And I talked with other people about this, and other guys about this who have dated married women, and they're like, oh yeah, it's crazy. I know there's a fair amount of guys who used to be kind of like I wouldn't necessarily say PUAs, but guys that would go out and sleep with women.
Let's pick up
they wouldn't. Yeah, PUA, for people who don't know. But they'd go out and pick up women, but they would end up finding out that half the women that they're sleeping with are married, and that's what caused them to go MGTOW, because they're like, holy shit, these women look and argue publicly as pure as the driven snow, and they say the exact same shit you're saying, Poe, but then behind closed doors, it's bukkake chokeslam time. So I get it. I see what you're saying, and no disrespect to you, but I'm saying, if assuming that everything that you say is true for yourself, which is fine, we can go with that. Just because you're the exception, that doesn't make it the rule. And this idea.
Why do you think your experience is the rule and my experience is the exception? It sounds like the women you're describing the exception, and I mean, this is just my own personal experience.
I think it's a valid point.
Experience.
I think you make a valid point. I'm not just referring to my anecdotal experience. So I was using my anecdotal experience as an example. This was something that I went out and actually researched. Ever since I've been on the TFM show, I go out and I talk to men. I talk to men in his server. I talk to men in the comments. I talk to men on the internet. I speak to men in my local environment, in the real world, and I'm testing these theories. And for everything that I've seen, and everything that I've read, infidelity is huge, and it's way higher than what most people report. And so this idea that, I mean, even if you take it just from a step of infidelity, even if we move beyond infidelity, again, you look at the feminized laws that are out there. It makes no sense for a man to marry or commit to a woman who can destroy his life at the drop of a hat.
I mean,
go ahead.
Just to say on stay focused on what we were talking about before. I think the way that you're collecting data on by talking to men, and especially not just MGTOW obviously, but of course talking to MGTOW is going to give you a selection bias of hearing bad stories about women. I mean, you say you're talking to men in real life, of course, but the same thing with pickup artists as well. I mean, the kind of women that pickup artists associate with are naturally going to be, let's just say, a bit more liberated than just a random selection of women. I mean, I'm not saying that anything you're saying is a lie, but I think it's an exaggerated view because of limitations on the way that you're collecting data on the women who stay at home. They're not being represented at all in any of these tests. So there's just no way to find out how many of these women are staying at home and being good mothers and good wives, because you're only ever hearing about the ones who aren't.
I think that both sides, both of you, are both talking about statistics in an interesting way. And I think that a lot of people use the evidence they've found for their own position, confirmation bias. I think this is a pretty prevalent thing. So, and I think the distribution aspect is really important. I think the club concepts that DDJ brought up, talking about PUAs getting married women in clubs and stuff, that is a subsection of the overall population. The club, the people that go to the club, not everybody is going to go there. Not even 50% of people are going to go there.
But what you guys are not understanding is that I'm not just talking about this from some anecdotal viewpoint. I'm not just some random guy on the road. I worked in family law for over. Hear me out. I worked in family law for over 10 years, and the majority of the divorces, I would say 85 to 90% of the divorces I worked on, and the divorces I heard about, the woman cheated on the man. And in every instance where the woman filed divorce, and it wasn't the man who filed divorce, in every instance, the woman who filed was the one that was unfaithful. In every set of circumstances.
I'd rather see some actual statistics on that rather than just hearing about your family court law. First of all, you're not hearing about married couples, you're only hearing about the ones who are getting divorced.
The married couples don't last.
Yeah, I understand
the marriages fail. Static Brain, if you go to staticbrain.com, if you guys go to staticbrain.com right now, if you go there, you'll see that after 10 years, according to Static Brain, and supposedly their numbers come from the census and the CDC.
Yeah, supposedly. There's no actual links to any data on that website.
Well, yeah, but these guys do professional statistics, and they show that 93% of all marriages fail beyond 10 years.
Yeah, that's absolutely completely unfounded as far as I can tell. I've been looking at that website. I've been trying to find any link to any data set. There's nothing. There's just that 6.6% next to the 10-year mark, and I can't even determine that this is how legit this website is. It's got ads on it. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, not that you can judge a book by its cover. It doesn't look like a legit website, and
it is. I've actually spoken with the people who work there. They're a legit statistics company, and they do statistics for a variety of things, and they do corporate statistics.
Well, why don't they publish the actual data set then, rather than just some numbers next to the column?
Probably because they want to make money on their services. Well, I could see that and everything is fishy as heck if you look at it from a confirmation bias standpoint, like you were saying before.
Really. I mean, I get my data directly from the government publishing their statistics. It's not interpretations of statistics. They literally count up the number of divorces every year, and they compare it to last year. They count up the number of marriages. They count up divorces where the accusation of one spouse against the other has been proved. I mean, it's
but with no fault divorce, those things don't ever get litigated. That's the problem with no fault divorce, is that when it comes to infidelity.
I'm just talking about my standard of data compared to Static Brain or Statistic Brain, whatever it's called.
Right. But again, I think that you would agree that given the way that the gynocentric laws are there, even if a woman did cheat, there's no way for a man to hold her accountable.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that's probably correct.
Okay.
You're more
So, I
familiar
mean,
with it than me, so I'm going to take your word for that.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, you're a female. If you cheated on your husband, what could he do to hold you accountable legally?
If you found out about it?
Yeah, yeah, obviously if you found out about it. Obviously if you messed up and got caught, sure.
Well, I didn't want to get onto this. This is probably not exactly the way I wanted to bring it up, but what I wanted to ask you actually is, given the fact that my husband and I we own all of our assets jointly. So our mortgage, which is our biggest asset by far, is paid for equally. You know, from each of our salaries is the amount that we own is completely equal, and the amount that we pay towards it is completely equal. And you know, we own our own cars. We pay for our own cars. There's nothing of my husband's that I'm using that's you know, particularly valuable. So, given that, if my husband divorced me, and I didn't, well, let's just say that I'm a decent human being and I don't accuse him of anything that he hasn't done, or even hold anything of any of the things that he has done against me, what financially could I do to my husband to ruin him?
Well, you didn't answer the question. I'll rephrase
sorry.
it.
I got back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
but I'll definitely address your question because I think it's valid.
My answer is he could divorce me.
Okay. So basically what you're saying then is his only option is to file a divorce. Now, if he files divorce and you go to court,
we could try and make it work after infidelity, but assuming that he didn't want to do that, he could file for divorce. Yes.
Right. So yeah. So the only legal recourse that a man has against you is to file divorce, and because the divorce courts are saturated with feminists and saturated with man-hating bigots, you're going to go to divorce court, and your attorney, if he is sober that day and maybe put on his tie correctly, is going to walk into court and he's going to go, well, you know, Your Honor, PoThePerson has the right to live in the way that she was living before they separated, so she should get the house, and he should still pay for it because her income's going to get her income's going to get cut in half, and she's going to have the children. So there's between a 70 and 80. If you had children, what the hell do you have the little children's books in the back for? You have a video.
Look, I'm in my early 20s. I'm not as old as I look.
No, I get it. So you're in your 20s looking at children's books?
Well, they're not children's books. They're graphic novels, actually.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, I get it. Okay, I was about to get onto you first. I was like, really? No.
I'll like to step in for a second.
Hold on, Concept Hut. So if you had children, there's a 70 to 85% chance that no matter what happened in the divorce, you would get custody of those kids unless they could prove that you were completely abusive to the point where maybe social services would step in. Well, there's a really good chance, and he would get kicked out of the house, and the court would order spousal payments to you. Now, and that's if you've been I don't know if you've been like over 5 or 6 years. And I've seen this happen a lot, not just in the UK, but I've seen it happen in the United States. So even though he could go, oh well, the person was unfaithful to me, I went and filed divorce, he would go to court trying to hold you accountable, or at least trying to separate assets, and he would get hammered in the process unless you decided that you were going to sit down and be a reasonable woman, and you guys are like, look, we paid for this equally, let's keep the attorneys out of it, and let's have an agreement, and let's divorce amicably. But if the attorneys got involved, or if the judge decided that the judge didn't like the way that guy looked the other day, they'll crucify him, even if you don't want them to.
Yeah.
What did he do?
Nothing.
We don't have any children, so that's
I'm telling you what the hypotheticals look like.
Okay, yeah. You're talking about the risks of having children within a marriage, not the
Well,
risks
even without children, those risks exist.
Right. Like what? Sorry, can you please? You were talking about custody and about sex.
Oh yeah, okay. So let's take the custody out of the argument for a minute. Even if he did file divorce, if the judge thought he was abusive, or the judge decided that they wanted to screw him, there'd be nothing anybody could do. They would give you the house, they would give you the assets you asked for. If you decided you wanted to have a contested divorce, and you just said, you know what, I'm going to ask for everything and let's just see what happens, you would get most of what you asked for, and he would get hammered in the return.
Just because I could lie about abuse and he couldn't do the same to me?
Correct. Absolutely. Listen, you guys run off of a listen and believe standard, and you have a parallel system of justice thanks to the Duluth model. So you could accuse him of abuse in divorce court and never file a police report, and they will take that as true. And as long as you continue to allege it, the court's going to go, well, we're just going to go ahead and err on the side of judgment, or on the side of caution here, and we're just going to enter the domestic violence restraining order instead, or we're going to go ahead and screw him instead.
And
just
prize,
because
the prize for being a victim of domestic violence is more assets, is it?
It absolutely is. Yeah, it's not only more assets, it's social currency. Domestic violence abuse victims, if you're an immigrant, they allow you a backdoor into immigration and give you permanent residency. They allow you financial aid for college. They give you housing assistance. They give you all kinds of different assistance you need in addition to legal assistance. They trigger, being a DV victim triggers so many different forms of welfare for a woman. It's not even funny.
Even when it's not
even
proved.
if it's not, even when it's not proved.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think alimony is the biggest thing. You know, it's like child support for an adult. You know.
Yeah, I was hoping you could explain alimony to me, because it was my understanding that it's calculated. Well, obviously there's a certain amount of judgment involved by the judge and the legal entities involved, but it's a simple calculation based on the difference in salaries. Is that correct, ostensibly?
No, well, it's supposed to be. Basically, the idea of alimony is, let's just say, again, we use the marriage analogy. You know, I'm married to Jane, and maybe I won the lottery before I got together with Jane, so I'm loaded for bear. Jane doesn't work. Jane and I get together, the relationship doesn't work. Jane says, you know what, we were married 10 years, he won the lottery, I don't work, I'm going to go on welfare. If I don't get alimony, I'm going to be in the poorhouse, and the judge is going to go, well, he won the lottery, and since he was financially supporting you, you deserve additional financial support. So they'll order somewhere between 5 and 10 years of alimony, typically, sometimes as little as 3, and I'm spitballing here.
These are really low numbers.
These are really low numbers. But here's the thing that really fucks it up. Is that if I have retirement accounts, you get access to those retirement accounts as well. And it doesn't matter if I'm disabled. It doesn't matter if I'm like a disabled veteran, for example. It doesn't matter if I have a disability. I've seen cases where that alimony gets awarded anyway. And then in addition to that, you know, if I got into a car accident in the middle of the marriage, and let's say I had a settlement from that car accident that I kept separate from the marital estate, the court could award that to the wife as well. And I've seen that happen many times, and there was a news article recently that had that in. And
so is that, are those in cases where the wife wasn't working, or where she was working, or, you know, the fact that whether the wife is working at all or not, and how much she's earning, how does that come into the alimony procedure and sort of calculations?
The way the laws that I have read, I should say the laws that I have read and the laws that I've talked to other attorney, or I should say not other attorney, I'm not an attorney, I'm a paralegal, but I've talked to attorneys and legal professionals about, alimony is supposed to be based on the difference in income between the two parties, as well as financial need of the person requesting it. And when it's a man requesting it, it's called palimony, and when a woman gets it, it's called alimony.
Well, it's called spousal support in this country.
They've reframed it as spousal support. So this idea that you know, it's supposed to be, you know, again, financial necessity, difference in income, but the financial necessity is important. What the problem is that that's not how the law is implemented. You see, the judges have what's called discretion, and they use it's called basically when a judge abuses their discretion, you can take an appeal, but an appeal is costly, and most appeals fail. So the judge has a wide variety of things that they can do to rely on and to give them additional discretion to end up screwing the man in that alimony argument. And it's a shit show. Now, again, you seem reasonable. If you're making equal money to your husband, if you guys pay everything down the line and you guys split up, and you guys could work out an amicable arrangement, well then, yeah, no, I would say, look, keep the courts out of it as much as possible. Go in with a an agreed settlement that you've already come up with and you've hashed out on your own, and then leave it there. But if you guys got attorneys involved, or if it was contested in any way, you're probably going to take your husband to the cleaners.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
well,
real quick, I want to interject here, with before it gets too lost. The difference I think you guys are talking about. It sounds like Poe is talking about how she and people she finds reasonable would not screw over their partner. And,
well, I didn't say that.
Well, at least that's how I am interpreting this.
At least she admitted it.
The DDJ
can't
sounds
tell,
like
right?
he's talking about the objective statistics and the actual power to screw people over, regardless of stated intent.
Yeah, well, we talked a little bit at the beginning about the benefits, and I'm not going to harp on about the benefits of marriage anymore. But this idea, well, obviously DDJ paints a very big picture indeed of the divorce courts, and you know, it's obviously cause for concern. I'm very concerned about this. I'm worried about the men, and because I'm so pro-marriage, having such a terrible divorce system is obviously upsetting for me, because I want people to stay in happy marriages and to have legal recourse to get divorced in a way that is fair. But what I'm concerned is that obviously DDJ says that he works in family courts a lot, and I have no reason to doubt that. But to make a big decision like this, and to commit your life to MGTOW rather than what you might prefer, I would really like to see sort of harder evidence of the sexism of the courts. What I see a lot in MGTOW is what you've been talking about, DDJ, which is what could happen, and what often does happen, according to you. And I don't believe that you're being deceptive, and yet I haven't seen that in the divorced men that I know. And although they certainly don't look on their divorce or their marriage kindly, they don't seem to be completely ruined financially or emotionally. Of course, I don't know many divorced men intimately, but they every divorced man I know, without exception, seems to be doing pretty okay. They haven't had their life ruined by divorce, and I haven't seen any statistics from MGTOW to indicate how many men's lives have been well, it's hard to define, right? Because some divorces can be none of them are good usually. They're bad, or they're very bad, or they're extremely bad, and those you can probably quantify those in a dollar amount that each man has lost to his wife. But I'd really like to see some data on how many men this is affecting, how many men are being falsely accused of things. Of course, it's hard to tell that they have been falsely accused. You might have actually done it.
Let me address that, because I actually can answer that for you.
Great.
I did a video, one of my first videos. It was called "Avoiding Marriage Is Not Enough," where I used United States statistics, where every year 1 million men are having domestic violence restraining orders, civil restraining orders placed against them for crimes they didn't commit. Every year, 1 million. Now, the United States today has about...
Sorry, go on.
In the United States today, we have a population of about 340 million people. Of that population, somewhere between 220 and 250 million are adults. You figure if half of those people are men, you're talking maybe 150 million men, 130, 140 million men, population, adult men in the United States. Every year, 1 million of them are having a permanent restraining order placed against them in family court, a civil domestic violence restraining, not a criminal one, a civil one. Now, that's the permanent orders. That doesn't talk about the orders that are placed for a year or 5 years or 10 years. That's the permanent ones. Usually, when a permanent order comes up, it's because the order's been re-upped. These men, the majority of them, have never been charged with a crime. They've never been prosecuted for a crime. Their crime was that they were dumb enough to commit to a woman who could do this to them. Now, as far as where you've not seen, hear me out. As far as is the statistics about where you've not seen this idea of the family courts being biased or the stats against men, I did a video about the Duluth model and about the ideological subversion of society. Now, in it, Ellen Pence, who is the co-founder of the Duluth model, which, by the way, is the most popular domestic violence intervention program in the world, and it is the basis of all domestic violence legislation everywhere where feminism has been adopted, has incorporated patriarchy theory, feminist patriarchy theory specifically, that paints every man as an oppressor and every woman as a victim. And the woman who created this model admitted to lying about it. And this is your schools teach it, your sexual harassment policies for your corporations that you work for teaches it. All this, the Duluth model and its theories, its flawed theories and its dishonest theories have been incorporated in almost every aspect of society, in any society that has adopted feminist policies. So the reason that you don't see it is because it's everywhere. And what I mean by that is that, and I'm going to give an anecdotal example. I had a guy reach out to me on Twitter in direct messaging, and he's from India. Now, I call India Cuckistan, and the reason I call it Cuckistan is because India is just, it's fucked. The guys, they get hammered on horribly. Women are able to kidnap men at gunpoint and then sue them for dowry. I mean, it's really bad. Well, he was telling me, he goes, you know, when you first started talking about this, I was thinking to myself, well, this is just one state. It's not the entire country. It's not everywhere. And then he thought about it. And he goes, man, I wasn't thinking about this right. Because the reality is that I had to have somebody halfway across the world tell me what was wrong with the feminist policies in my country, because I had already been so indoctrinated into accepting it, I never even thought that it was wrong. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of the sociological, ideological conditioning of everybody in society. That's why if you look at the court stats, and since you're a big data girl, let's look at the court stats. That's why women get lesser jail sentences than men. Because if a woman commits domestic violence against a man, they never say, we need to hold her accountable. They say, what did the man do to deserve it? And so, you know, she goes to prison less if she goes at all. There's a huge epidemic of married women who are child pedophiles. And nobody's talking about it. But, you know, domestic violence is a crime, and rape and assault are crimes committed by men against women, supposedly. That's not the case at all. So, you know, I see where you're going, and again, I respect your viewpoint, but I think that, you know, you were talking earlier about how maybe I'm looking at this from a level of confirmation bias, and how to, you know, looking at this from a certain lens. I think you might be doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I've only just sort of started getting into this, you know, red pill men's rights activist and MGTOW situations. So it's definitely possible that I could begin to see it more and more. But I can only talk from my standpoint at the moment. And like I was saying before, the devil really is in the details with statistics. So just going back to what you were just saying about, well, first of all, you started talking about was it restraining orders and crimes that men commit that aren't being they're being punished for crimes they didn't commit. So I'm guessing that your only way of saying that they weren't committed is saying that they weren't proven, which is fair enough, because you know, people are innocent until they're proven guilty. That's fair enough. But
well, I think there's an easy way. There's an easier way to define that. The easiest way to define it is, you're right, it's innocent until proven guilty. But these people are being accused of a crime. You know, it's, if a guy's a domestic violence perpetrator and you're going to call him a DV perp, he should have been convicted, or he should have publicly admitted to it. So, like, the standard that I go from for somebody is number one, did a jury convict you in a criminal court setting? Or number two, did you say something publicly, or did you say something in a verifiable way that's like, oh yeah, I smacked her around, I thought it was funny. Okay, you're a DV perp, right? So those are the kind of standards I go from. But when somebody gets accused of a crime, we have a system in place to handle that. It's called law enforcement and the criminal courts. If we use anything other than that, you're talking about a parallel system of justice that is more likely to abuse somebody than to help them. And that's the problem, is that the conversation around civil domestic violence restraining orders is not whether or not they should even exist. It's how often is the man guilty? And that's the wrong conversation to have. Because if a man is guilty of a crime, then he should go to jail for it. If he's not guilty of the crime, then everybody should go play hide and go fuck themselves because they're falsely accusing people of doing it. And I don't know how it is in the United Kingdom, but in the United States, we have a constitutional right to be innocent until proven guilty of a crime. We have a right to confront our accusers. We have a right to cross-examine our accusers. We have a right to an attorney. We have a right to a jury trial. We have a right to a speedy trial. And we are the only country in the world that has those rights. And those rights in the United States are being attacked every day. But if a woman in the UK, for example, if she accuses a man of rape or domestic violence, she doesn't even have to go to court. They allow her to take multiple takes, put her in video, record her testimony, and he never gets a chance to cross-examine her at all. And yet they're trying to say, oh, well, you know, this is credible. No, it's not. Jesus Christ, you gave the bitch a script, you coached her in the evidence, you told her what to say, you put her in nice clothing, and then you video recorded her. How is a jury going to be able to question her credibility when you've done 15 takes on a video recorded testimony? That's coaching. That's witness tampering, and it should be a crime.
I just wanted to clarify, is this in divorce court or in regular court?
In the United Kingdom, it's in criminal court, and they're pushing for it to be in divorce court now.
Okay, I actually didn't know about this difference between sort of domestic abuse in the case of divorce and just as a crime, although that does make sense. But it's something that I'd like to discuss because it's interesting to me that, I mean, being a domestic abuser is it's a crime at a certain point, right? But being a domestic abuser where it's essentially just being a poor husband or a poor wife, being not standing up to your duties and being a violent person who's not living up to the promise they made to on their wedding day to be respectful to the other person and to not abuse them, basically.
Right, I would agree with that.
Obviously, there needs to be evidence in both cases, but I think the idea that they either committed a crime and they should go to the jail, or it shouldn't be brought into court at all, I think that seems to be a little bit backwards to me because, you know, I mean, this is kind of what we're seeing with hashtag Me Too. Is that I don't want to get too much into that, but there's a way to be a bad husband or a bad boyfriend that is it's a shitty thing to do. Well, you know, you can be a bad. Well, what I'm saying is that it's not against the law to be some certain behavior to be abusive to your wife or your girlfriend is not. It's not necessarily against the law, but it is still breaking the contract you made to be a good husband or just to be an adequate one.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that every man is the perfect husband, and I'm not saying that men don't verbally abuse their women. Fuck, men verbally abuse their friends. I meet with my friends and I'm like, oh, hey, fucker, how you doing? They're like, oh, you know, I got guys in the chat. There was some guy that was like DDJ, calls me that all the time, and we're friends. It's abusive, but it's
not really abuse.
You know, we take it tongue in cheek, but technically it's verbal abuse. So all I'm saying is that, like, you know, when it comes to being verbally abusive, or when it comes to not standing by your contract of marriage and commitment, the solution should be to either fix it or to quit the relationship. It shouldn't be to crucify the guy for it. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying, you know, yeah, if a guy is verbally abusive to you, or if you think that, or if you're cheating on him, or if he has time that's unaccounted for, maybe he goes.
Even being physically abusive might not be. You might not want to take it to criminal court, is what I was saying.
Oh, and you know, I would agree with that. But what you're discussing is patriarchy at that point.
Well, I think it's depending on the crime, of course, and the severity of it. There's certain, I mean, maybe I shouldn't be saying this in front of my husband. There's a certain level of domestic abuse that I would be able to put up with and go like, well, maybe I did deserve it. You know, like what? It was just a one-time thing. It was, you know. He didn't, you know, he threw a cup near my head, or, you know, something like that, where he's taking out his aggression, but he's not actually hurting me, or he didn't hurt me that much. And I'd rather keep him as my husband for now, at least, until he does it a few more times, and then maybe we'll get divorced and we'll go through all of that. But
is that the three cups you're out rule?
Well, like, there's a difference between being a bad husband and being a criminal, right? And that's not necessarily the difference between verbal abuse and physical abuse. You can still, there's certain levels of, if he threw his drink in my face, that's not a crime. It's just rude. It's just
right.
Being.
Well, so guys, you heard it here first. Poe supports the pimp hand.
That's up to every woman, I think.
At least the cup hand.
Right, pimp hand strong. Hashtag pimp hand strong. So no, I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying, and I see what you're saying. And and that's the thing is that before feminism was a thing, a woman or a man would get in an argument. Maybe the neighbors would call the police, right? The cops would show up, and the woman's like, "Yeah, I kind of stepped out of line, and it escalated or whatever, and it is what it is, and I don't want him to go to jail, and we're sorting it out." And the cop would be like, "All right, well, you guys sort it out. Have a good night." And then the cop would leave. But you can't do that anymore. They have mandatory arrest laws.
You know what they should do for domestic violence calls is they should bring a couple cop cars, like I imagine they do, but bring some boxing gloves and be like, "All right, fight it out here."
Well, we had a couple who used to live next door to us. I was friends with their daughter, but that would happen frequently. Is maybe this is part of my bias, but the man was frequently physically abusive towards the woman and towards his daughter, who wasn't his. And we could hear them shouting a lot, breaking things, hitting each other. The woman crying, the daughter crying, and sometimes they'd call the police. Most of the time they didn't, but when they did, usually the police would just go away after a while. They say, "Okay, we settled it. We don't want to prosecute. There's no crime here. We just got into a fight." And that was definitely a bad relationship, but that the law never got involved is what I'm saying. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really making a point. I'm just stating an anecdote. I suppose it's not. It's perhaps. It's interesting to see a different point of view, I think.
Yeah, and I get it. And just so we're on the same page too, like I don't hate women. I don't. And
I've gathered that from the channel, which is,
yeah. I don't hate women. I don't think that women are evil. I don't think they should be referred to as femoids or any bullshit like that. But on the same token, just because every woman may not want to destroy your life as a man because of the way the feminist laws are written, every woman can at the drop of a hat and can turn your life upside down. And I've seen, and again, if you've seen some of my videos, you know that, I mean, they can get a civil domestic violence restraining order and have you homeless, have access to your bank account, have access to everything that you own, and force you to pay for everything that she's taking from you as a man. So, for me, I get it. I'm just saying that, like, if you're walking into a bad neighborhood at night, right, and you get jumped because it's 3 a.m. and you've chosen to walk in a bad neighborhood, it's kind of your fault.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't have been there in the first place, right? You're like, "Oh, you're a fucking idiot. You shouldn't have been there. Why were you there?" "Well, I wanted to go to Jack in the Box and I figured I'd walk." No, you're a fucking moron.
I think I want to add something to this because I like what you're saying, but there's a consideration here, which is I forgot. You were talking fast and I forgot.
No problem.
Great moderator here.
Yeah, this guy. No, I'm playing. No, but my point is it like to use the analogy of the walking through the bad neighborhood, right? You shouldn't have been there in the first place. And well, for myself, I'm about to. For myself, the idea is that if you're getting married, you shouldn't, because you're walking through a bad neighborhood and you're about to get jumped, and your life could be on the line for it.
And the alternative is MGTOW. You wouldn't suggest cohabiting with a woman and starting a family outside of marriage?
No, I wouldn't, because so no cohabitation, no commitment, no marriage, and I've even heard of guys who are like, "Oh, I'm gonna import my wife from Thailand or whatever," and that doesn't help either.
What about from Luke? What was it? Yugoslavia?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, I remember that guy. That poor guy.
So, I remember what I was gonna say. This I think is a little bit of a twist I would like to look at here, which is that people can be very nice and reasonable at first, but there's a point I think that everybody has that when you cross them, they will gives themselves the license to behave as they normally don't. So if you know you're married, you have kids, you know they trust you a lot, you know enough to have kids with, you know, and live with and see their bank account, whatever. But if you do something to really piss them off, like you can have an argument about something dumb or even important like bills or whatever, but if you cheat on them, that is their line, and they will burn your shit and throw you out and, you know, do terrible things to you because you crossed this line. How someone behaves when you cross the line is not something you can predict unless you've seen them cross that line with somebody else.
I would agree with that completely.
Right. Everyone's a nice guy until you cross them.
Yeah, I always say that you never really know a woman until you've met her in divorce court.
Yeah, I mean, I've had this scenario happen to me in my life. I thought I could trust this person. I've trusted them for years, and then something changed and came completely bad after that. It was a nightmare. You know, it's people do that. You know, it's part of humanity.
Obviously, it's not avoidable completely, but I think that's why it's good to get in a few good scraps with your spouse before getting married, or you know, even before moving into each other, just in with each other, just to make sure that you make sure that they're okay to argue with. They're not completely unreasonable and they don't resort to violence. I mean, of course, you don't know how they're going to react when you know when things go really bad, but just to know how they act in an argument, I think is really helpful. Even if you have to get into an argument just to find that out and make it a good one.
I think how you also see them treat other people is important too. In a similar way, like their long-term friendships, if they are deceitful with their friends, etc. It's sort of that whole you know, if you're willing to lie to this person, then you're probably willing to lie to me too.
Yeah, definitely. That's a red flag.
Well, I always say as well is that you never really know somebody until you've seen them in all seasons twice.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very true. Go ahead.
How long have we been talking? Because there's some more things I wanted to bring up in this conversation, but I feel like we've been talking for like 100 years.
90 minutes.
Yeah, we've been talking a while, but
again. Yeah.
But if you guys are wanting to, yeah, we can. But if you guys are both willing, we can extend this a little further.
I could a little bit, I think. Sorry, DDJ. I mean, no disrespect, because everything you're saying is very interesting. But I feel like you have been monopolizing a little bit. That's not really your fault. I'm a bit of a pushover, to be honest. So I don't like interrupting, and you stand your ground very well, so you don't really let me interrupt. But I mean, we did see how bad it gets when I ramble on at the start of this conversation. But I did want to ask.
It's okay. I like a submissive woman. It's fine.
Well, what I'd really like is to just ask you a few questions and then get a short-ish response.
Sure.
For them, but only if you've still got the energy. Because to be honest, I'm running down a little bit. But I really would like to cap this off because I feel like I haven't really had my say yet in this one.
Yeah, I tell you what. Let's just do like a lightning round. We can go. We're at an hour and 35 minutes right now. Where we've either been streaming or attempted to stream. Let's go until the top of the hour, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, go ahead and hit me with the questions, and I'll try not to be verbose.
Okay, I'm gonna stick to one question. It's gonna be a tricky one, so I'm gonna spend a couple of minutes, well, maybe just 1 minute, defining the question as best as I can, and maybe just have a little back and forth just based on that. So, what I'd really like to hear from you is why is there a MGTOW community, especially on YouTube, with hundreds of hours of content? It seems like, to me, from the definition of MGTOW, I would expect that MGTOW videos would be just what you've been talking about today, which is divorce law, the risks of getting divorced, how feminism has possibly contributed to this, and maybe some advice for men on well, we're talking about sex protection. What's it called? Sex education for children earlier. I think Concept Hub brought it up, and I actually was thinking about that as well, because with MGTOW, it seems like the advice is always don't get married, don't cohabit, and keep relationships as short as possible. But for some men, that might it's too tempting, right? To move into a woman and have children. They just want to, like in the same way that teenagers want to have sex. So if the only advice you're ever giving them is don't do that, then they don't. I don't think MGTOW is really helping those men who either want to be in a relationship but don't want it to. They don't want to move into with each other, or they want to move in but they don't want to marry. It seems like that would be how if I had a MGTOW channel, that's what I would be telling men, is sort of helping them at every stage.
Right, and I think that it's interesting you bring that up. There is a whole aspect of MGTOW that you're missing, and that is that MGTOW, the MGTOW philosophy, the MGTOW lifestyle, and the voices of MGTOW, myself, Turd Fling Monkey, Sandman, Barbarossa, Stardust, Marcus, and a lot of the people who've been around in the community for a while. We don't just talk about what to avoid. We also talk about what to live for. How do you be the best man you can be for yourself? How can you make a good life for yourself? How you can help out. Now, I agree with you that there are some MGTOW channels that don't necessarily inform about the same types of things I do. However, I know that the most of the stuff that I talk about, Turd Flinging Monkey is covered in his channel over the years. And I know that MGTOW 101 is covered in, but everybody covers it with a different lens or a different flavor. I bring the legal knowledge and experience to the forefront, and I bring the fact that I'm a published author to the forefront. And so I talk about the things that I've researched. I talk about the things that I know, and I speak from a legalistic standpoint or from a legal lens rather than a layman's lens. And so I can deep dive into some of these things a little bit deeper than some of the other content creators because of that level of knowledge and experience.
Yeah, that's definitely what made you stand out to me after looking into you, is that expertise in the legal. Because to me, it seems like the law is everything, right?
It is.
Women are involved as well. Obviously, women are taking advantage of it, but the law, to me, seems like that is the problem, is the law, and to the extent that the law is the problem, also the women and the men who allowed these laws to come into effect are the problem. And it seems like a lot of MGTOW seem to either de-emphasize that or kind of forget about it. But that's your channel is great. I'm not I can't punish you for the crime of MGTOW, but I wondered if you had any insight into. I mean, maybe it's just the ones that are the popular videos, or the ones that are getting recommended to me just by the YouTube algorithm. But it seems like I see a lot of MGTOW videos, and especially a lot of MGTOW comments about they just sound very bitter and very with lots of disdain for women. That's not what I get from you, and I don't want to have a go at you for that. But it seems to be that MGTOW might not be a force for good, despite the fact that channels like yours exist and giving good advice to men about the risks that they could be getting into. It seems like there's just so much bitterness. Would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I think that you're looking at MGTOW with the wrong lens. MGTOW is not like feminism. Feminism is an ideology. Feminism is a political movement. It's same like the thing with the men's rights movement. The men's rights movement is an ideology, and it is a political movement. MGTOW is a personal philosophy, and it is a lifestyle choice. And every man makes his own decisions on what lifestyle he chooses to live. Now, with regard to MGTOW content creators out there, there are going to be, I'm not going to be able to reach every man. There's going to be people who hear my voice and they're like, oh, his voice is shit, or they're going to listen to my message, or they're going to see my channel and they're going to be like, oh, well, he doesn't do this, he's not a real MGTOW or whatever, and they're going to have that. And there's only been, and I'm not going to get into this here, but there's only been one person who I've specifically called out as being an interest into the MGTOW community. Well, no, there's been two. that I've called out as entries into the MGTOW community for their own purposes. But at the same token, those people do help men. I don't think they're evil. I don't think they're necessarily like horrible people all the way across the board. But they've helped men, and even like if you look at Angry MGTOW, for example, a lot of people give him shit because his questionable ethics and some of the things he's said and done. But I'm sure that there's a reason he has a following, and it's because he's able to reach men in the red pill rage. And the same thing with like the incel community or the TFL community who've crossed over into the MGTOW territory. So different content creators are going to be able to reach different segments of men based on where they are in their red pill knowledge and where they are in their MGTOW philosophy.
Can I just
so as men, go ahead.
I just want to know, it seems to me that MGTOW philosophy and the purpose of MGTOW is to target a very specific group of men, which is unmarried men who have yet to find out about this the hard way. So why would you want to reach out to, I don't really know what you mean by these different segments of men, but it seems like there's only really one segment of men that we should be being worried about, which is the ones who can still be saved.
Well, I think they all can be saved. I think that this idea that we're going to discriminate against some men and leave them out in the cold is
That's not what I meant, really. But,
okay, because I can tell you right now that the men who really need to be saved, as much as and you're right, as much as this idea that we need to save the younger men who've never been in these relationships so that they can avoid it. Men kill themselves because their women cheat on them. Men kill themselves because their families are destroyed. They go homeless as a direct result of a divorce. In the legal community, we have a saying that the first stop after divorce is bankruptcy court for a man. And it's so common, it's not even funny. And so, these men devoted their lives to these women. When they took their marriage vows, they thought they were going to holy shit, when I have a family, I'm gonna live the American dream, or I'm gonna live the family dream, and this is what I'm gonna do. And then when that relationship dies, regardless of the reason, these men lose their way because they got the job so they could support their family. They got the they could support their family. They made the decisions, short-term and long-term decisions, based on the needs of their family and on the desires of the woman that they're with. And so these men are lost. When their divorce happens, when their relationship ends, these men are absolutely lost. And so all I'm saying is that when it comes to these men, all of them have to be saved, but we have to meet these men where they're at. We can't meet them where they want to be because we live in an imperfect world. So there's going to be men that are going to be like, oh, I hate all women, or all women are bitches, or this and that. And those men are angry and they're hurt. And like any wounded animal, they're going to lash out at anybody who gets close to them. So that's my thought there. I'm sorry, I told you I wouldn't monologue, and I started to.
That's fine. I think you got to what I was saying, but sometimes, I mean, like I said, your channel's good, but this is more a critique of other MGTOW, and I just wondered if you about your gripes with the MGTOW community. But to me, it seems like a lot of MGTOW content, MGTOW videos is not helpful for men. I mean, I'm not a clinical psychologist or a self-help guru, but it seems like a lot of the lot of things that I see are kind of, they're just not helpful to men who are hurting, like the ones we're talking about now, the ones who are hurting after marriage, after being betrayed. They've already been red pilled essentially because they found out firsthand, right? But you're saying they need a community, or I think that's what you're saying, is that they need a community to sort of embrace them and tell them that they're not the only one, sort of letting them know they're not alone and that this is happening to lots of men, and it's not just their woman who was who turned out couldn't be trusted. And the way I see it, it's just not maybe it's a woman looking in on a man's community and not seeing, not really understanding it properly, but it just doesn't seem like a very happy, peaceful place. I mean, of course, it's not going to be happy. It's going to be sort of mournful and talking about bad experiences, but it just seems more angry and very, very blamey and judgy to me, rather than helpful, encouraging, and sort of loving and embracing. That I would, expect of a sort of support group for men.
Well, and I understand that, but what you have to understand is that men get stronger and men heal through adversity. They don't heal through cuddling. And so, you know, when you teach men, like when you teach martial arts, you have sparring sessions and you hone your skill by proving your skill with that adversity that comes with the sparring session. When the men are angry and they get upset about stuff, they communicate in a way that men understand. And so men and women are different. They communicate differently and they understand things differently. And they are, I mean, men and women are different at every level. And even though men and women complement one another, they were never meant to be the same. So whereas you might appreciate a support group mentality or this idea because you're female, men don't. You know, so again, that's why you see people. There are MGTOW out there that are, you know, like Grizzly MGTOW, and you know, I don't even want to put his name with Angry MGTOW because Grizzly's so much better. But you look at like MGTOW Mindframe, for example. Both of those guys, if you listen to their channel as a female, you're going to get offended, and you're going to be really upset and go, "Holy shit, these guys hate women," and they don't. But their audience is, you know, it's a lot more angry than some others, if that makes sense.
I get the you know, the way that men communicate to each other. I'm somewhat familiar with the, you know, I have 2 older brothers, but of course I'm not an expert, and I can never experience it firsthand. But that's not exactly what I meant. I mean, of course, I don't know exactly what a bunch of men helping each other get through a hard time in their lives would look like. But I feel like what I'm seeing is lots of men dwelling on the bad experiences, speaking about how nothing that happened could possibly have been their fault or could have been avoided. Apart from, you know, they were tricked every step of the way, and of course the legal system screwed them over, which it did. They are justifiably angry and bitter, but it seems like dwelling on that anger and that the feeling of injustice against the system, and reliving it over and over and having it heightened by other men's experiences who are also talking about it. And like you said, maybe it is just me misunderstanding you know, a critique of the system as hatred towards women. But maybe this is just something we're going to have to agree to disagree on. But I don't, when I see MGTOW videos and MGTOW comments, it doesn't seem like these are things that could possibly help men. Maybe they're not, you know, cuddly and sweet like women comforting other women, but they're certainly, I think I understand a little bit about human nature and how best to get over grief. And it seems like this is not a good idea for getting over grief.
Hey, I would like to break in real quick on that note. That many people operate quite differently. Some people get through a stressful part of their life by burying themselves in work. Other people stay at home and watch TV all the time. There's a lot of different ways that people deal with things, and there's a large gulf between the average woman and the average man in how they behave when confronted with stressful situations. I would also like to know that women and men see different segments of the population. It's very much a confirmation bias scenario. So, and it's not just in this type of topic. There's a lot of things that you will see in your life, in your friends' lives, that when you talk to people, you know, like across the country or even a couple cities over, they'll wonder where the hell you came from because they've never seen that. So your family is all going to be relatively similar in a lot of ways. There'll be differences here and there, but in the same thing with family, friends, and your friends. So you're going to end up with different types of scenarios. So some guys haven't ever noticed that there's a crazy problem until they're put into the situation. So you even get segments between inside the gender grouping.
Yeah, of course.
So I think as men who have dealt with women a lot of times in a relationship scenario, I think that's why men have the things to talk about as they do. So I mean, a lot of guys would be like, "Well, I don't know how you meet so many terrible guys. That all my guy friends are great, you know." And the woman will be like, "Well, you don't date men." It's the same thing the other way around.
Right, but I think the other side that I think, Poe, this is something that you might be missing as well, and that is that I don't know of a single guy who identifies as MGTOW online who only subscribes to one channel. So maybe if they're feeling upset at that moment, they might go listen to Grizzly, or they might go listen to MGTOW Mindframe. You know, if they need to get some sleep, they go listen to Stardust. No disrespect to you, Stardust, but holy shit. You got to be in the right mood to listen to certain people's streams. You know, if they want a legal opinion, they listen to mine. If they want some current events, they listen to the TFM 420 show, or they listen to Sandman, or they listen to MGTOW 101. So, but a lot of these guys are, you know, they don't just subscribe to one channel. And there are stages that people get through. And what people understand is that the red pill rage is necessary. And what most people don't understand is that it can come back. So you might get out of the red pill rage. You might go to some of these other content creators and get away from the more angrier people that are out there. But then something will happen. It'll trigger you. And then you go back to the red pill rage for maybe a week or two. Then you get over it, and then you move back again. And so, again, it's one of those things that I think that you're missing, is that even though there are elements of the community that even I disagree with, that's not my place. There are men who need to hear that. There are men who need to communicate, or need to be communicated in that way at that moment. And so that's why those channels are successful.
Okay, that's something interesting, because I never really thought that if you, well, I'm familiar with red pill rages, but I never thought that being in a red pill rage and then watching some of the more angry MGTOW that you were talking about would then help you get over it, or it would just be something that would help you while you're getting through it naturally.
It's like group therapy. Everybody shares their war stories. They don't feel so alone anymore.
Okay, well, it's maybe I'm just a little bit.
Go to MGTOW.com. Yeah, go to MGTOW.com and look at the intro section. They have a whole set of forums in the intro section, and there's all these men who say, "Holy shit, I thought I was alone. I thought it was just me. I thought that there was something wrong with me." And they write these intros, and they write these horror stories, and they realize that not only are they not alone, but there are men willing to support each other, even if it's you know, dropping F-bombs toward each other, or being offensive, or being rude, or being kind, whatever that guy needs at the time. There is a MGTOW content provider to feed that need that he has.
Okay, I think I get. Well, I don't get it, but I think that's part of getting it. But I think, well, I don't want to compare you to MGTOW to feminism, because I know it's a sore spot, and I don't really understand it enough to, you know, make unwanted comparisons. But if we look at something like, let's say, communists, who people who or socialists in general, who I'm a bit more familiar with talking to, there's a kind of there's a similar kind of bitterness there. I think among people who are very upset with wealth distribution, and the fact that there are some people who are very, very rich and some people who are very, very poor, and that, to be honest, it doesn't seem like they really they don't talk about the people who are very, very poor that much, or things that would help them. They seem very concerned with the very rich, and it seems that, I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say about MGTOW, is that the content doesn't seem to be geared. Well, yours is, so I feel like I'm preaching to the converted here, but it seems like a lot of the content is not geared towards helping men, but it's geared towards blaming either the system or blaming women who are taking advantage of the system. And I think you've gone over that, and I'm starting to understand it a little bit more, how that could help. I mean, I don't see it, but I'll take your word for it. That's how that does help.
I'd like to expand on your point here. Well, reply / expand, whatever. So there, in any MGTOW, its simplest is that they're going their way from relationships with women, and I think there's even some talk about just even gay folks doing the same, because apparently the laws can get you screwed over regardless nowadays. And so it seems that you will have a lot of different ways to express or talk about the main subject. So like within a religious community, you'll have, okay, so even the same church of people, you'll have some of the people be all lovey-dovey, some will be all fire and brimstone. It'll be the same church. You'll get a gradient of perspectives regardless of what the topic is. It'll be chained to the topic, the core principle or principles, but the way people gather around this principle or principles will be different in how they do it. Some will be reasonable while some will be ludicrous. Like, for instance, a lot of people talk about, oh, them Christians and hating abortion so much they'll blow up abortion clinics. Well, yeah, some guy did, but that doesn't mean that the main group feels this way. It was one of the people. It was not a thing looked for from the principles. It was just somebody deciding to act on the principles in the way they saw fit.
Well, and there's something also that I think that is being left out of this conversation that needs to be included, and that is, in order to cure cancer, you have to identify it first. And MGTOW, the angrier MGTOW, the guys in the Red Pill Rage, all they're doing is identifying the problem at that stage.
They seem more sensitive to the issue.
Exactly. And so they seem more sensitive. It might seem to be confirmation bias. It might sound like bitching, and some of it probably is. But they're identifying the problem. Once they figure out what the problem is, then they go and they work to solve it in their own life. And so that's kind of where, again, that's why I say that, you know, those people in the Red Pill Rage, there are content creators for them. And, you know, just like you were saying with that group therapy about, you know, you got to share your war stories in order to understand it, because people will understand different things at different times. But with that in mind, we've been streaming for 2 hours, and I would like to do a quick shill alert, if I may.
Okay.
A quick what? Show alert?
Shill alert, yeah.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
For those of you who may be interested, tomorrow, I'll be streaming at 2:30 Pacific Standard Time on Twitch. I'll put up an announcement video on my channel, and we'll be talking with APOC, and we'll be talking about being a reluctant MGTOW. And we'll actually, what's interesting about this conversation with Poe is we're actually going to be developing this conversation already. We already had plans for it to develop this conversation from a MGTOW perspective. So if you're interested, we'll be streaming tomorrow, 2:30 Pacific Standard Time, 5:30 Eastern Standard Time, and there'll be an open Q&A session at the end. So if you have questions of either myself or APOC, we can answer those questions at that point. Also, don't forget, if you like what Poe is saying, feel free to subscribe to her channel. If you like Concept Hut, his willingness to host the stream, subscribe to him, bash that like button, you know, and support the people that are trying to support us.
Yeah, so where can people find you, DDJ?
You can find me at Twitter at Misandry Today. You can find me on YouTube. My channel is Misandry Today. You can also search for me on Twitch at Misandry Today as well. I have a Minds account at Carnivore, and you know, of course, my book is on Amazon under the pen name Bob Lewis. The Feminist Lie: It Was Never About Equality. How
about you, Poe? Where can people find you?
Yeah, just PoThePerson. Well, I suppose there'll be a link in the description or something like that. You can find me. My name's on the video, so just in case you're wondering what kind of videos I do, I suppose you've got a kind of feel for what I'm like. Although I don't usually talk about marriage, that's just one of the videos I made. I guess you can check out if you're interested. But my next video, I think, is going to be about understanding statistics and how difficult it is to understand statistics if you're not an expert in the subject, and how facts that are seemingly obvious can be more deceptive than you think. So if that's the kind of thing you are interested in, then please check out my next video.
Okay, so I imagine, DDJ, you're wanting to get going soon?
Yeah, my pussy's starting to hurt.
If you guys could give your final thoughts that'd be great. And then we can talk again later. Poe, you want to go first?
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot today, and I'd like to look into some of the stuff that DDJ has been talking about specifically with some of the statistics he brought up. I must say I'm still not convinced that MGTOW is right for everyone, but as I said at the start, it's completely it's a valid life choice for anyone who chooses to go that way, and I can understand completely why a man would want to avoid those risks. Yeah, thanks for talking to me, you guys.
Just stay on for a few minutes and after the show here. DDJ, give your final thoughts.
Sure. Poe, I appreciate your willingness to have a conversation with me. Thank you. Concept Hut, I appreciate you moderating this and setting this up. I think people from different belief systems and different walks of life, especially different continents, should have a meaningful dialogue. I think we only test our theories and we only test our systems by allowing them to be challenged. So Poe, I appreciate your attempts to challenge me today. I agree with you that MGTOW is not for every man. Not every man will choose it. I don't expect MGTOW to ever go mainstream, even though the unstated MGTOW community is growing exponentially even as we speak. And I do look forward to doing potentially another stream with you, either with Concept Hut or on my channel or on your channel, whatever that works. You seem more reasonable than many of the women that look at MGTOW from the outside. So the fact that you're open-minded and willing to listen and willing to share your views, I think is important.
Yeah, I think you both stay on just for a few minutes here. I'm going to wrap things up. So everybody, I hope you liked the stream. Sorry about the technical difficulties. First time streaming, so we'll get that figured out. I do plan to do more of these type of Concept Hut Presents kind of conversations between people who don't agree necessarily, or if at all possible, disagree wholeheartedly, but are willing to talk about it. I think this is the kind of conversation I would like to see more. Articulate kind of people with some intelligence, but have varying viewpoints that they can try to understand each other and explain the positions to the people watching. So that's the plan. I do a bunch of other videos about various different concepts, philosophy, politics, etc., science as well. Just like stuff, that's why it's under Concept Hut. So thank you everybody for coming, and we'll have to do it again sometime.